I feel to share some things that is very controversial in Christian circles. If you've been around in the Christian community for any amount of time, and this is the topic of God's sovereignty versus the free will of mankind. And how does it work together? Well, there are people that are polarized on one side and God controls everything, and then there's other folks on the other side that says, no, it's totally free will. And there are people in between. This is, there's God's perfect will and God's permissive will, and it goes on and on and on. But I just have come across a short writing by an individual whose name is David Cogburn, Davidcogburn, and it's one of the best writings I have personally seen on this topic, God's sovereignty versus man's free will. And I'm going to read this for you and then make a couple of comments myself at the end here. But I couldn't do justice by just ad-libbing here on my own. I think he does as good a job, if not the best, that I have ever had exposure to. So, I'm going to read what he says. It won't be too long, and then we'll end it, okay? Quote, probably a better description of this article is a hornet's nest, and that is true. There might not be a more controversial topic in Christianity today, and since the beginning, that God's sovereignty versus our free will. After all, who's in control? Are we in control of our free will, or is God in control of it? At first thought, it seems impossible to have free will and someone else be in control of it, right? Let's see if we can come up with an example that might demonstrate this. And this is really good. I've always thought of God's sovereignty as our free will under God's control. He says, I've always thought of God's sovereignty as our free will under God's control. That seems like a contradiction in terms, but is it? Let's see how that might look in a way that makes sense. This example is only a microcosm of the way things really are, and my desire with this example is not to create debate. Wise man. And I realize many might see hundreds of ways to shoot holes in this example. Nevertheless, let me present it. Leo is a lion living in the wild on the plains of Africa. He loves his life and enjoys his free will to do whatever he wants to do. Leo is a lesser species animal. There is a hunter who is a higher species man who has a plan. His plan is to go to the plains of Africa and capture a lion for the Fort Worth Zoo. He goes there, and one day he spots Leo taking a nap. He decides Leo will be the lion he captures and takes back to the Fort Worth Zoo. So he takes a goat and ties him up to a tree not far from where Leo is sleeping, and he puts a net in the tree to capture Leo. Finally, Leo wakes up after a long nap, and he's extremely hungry. He looks over and sees this goat in the shade of a tree. With his free will, he desires to eat this goat for lunch and sneaks up on it. Just before pouncing on the goat, a net falls down out of the tree, capturing Leo for the hunter. And Leo ends up going to the Fort Worth Zoo. Okay, now what has just happened here? The higher species hunter man has a plan to take Leo to the Fort Worth Zoo. Leo has free will and used it to go after the goat. Did the sovereignty, if you will, of the higher species hunter force quote unquote, force the lower species animal Leo to go after the goat? Or did Leo do that with his own free will? This would be a tiny example of a lesser species' free will being under the control of a higher species' plans. If we are, quote unquote, to assume that hunter man is God in this example, then the hunter, knowing the future, knows Leo is going to go after the goat and be captured by the net, even though Leo went after the goat with his own free will. In reality, this example is microscopic. Let's start that over again. In reality, this example is microscopic compared to the way things truly are in terms of God's plans and our free will. We do what we do when we want to do it. We do what we do when we want to do it, but God always has a, quote, way to accomplish his plan despite us not having a clue he's involved. Oh, how true. Perhaps the hunter Leo and the goat can, quote, finally put an end to this great debate. Conclusion here I've added in Proverbs chapter 16 verse 9, it reads, "The mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." It's found in the New American Standard translation of the Bible. The mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And this is just kind of a P.S. afterthought, but it truly is, I believe, revelation that many in the body of Christ has received from God. Satan and the demons that serve Satan are under control. They always have been, they always will be under the control of God, though God allows Satan and the demons until they're locked away in hell for eternity. He allows them to exercise their free will as well. However, they have parameters in which they always have to operate because God is sovereign over what they are allowed to do. So, I think this perfectly expresses God's sovereignty and man's free will. So I hope that encourages you somehow in this battle. I hope it gives you some insight, some peace. And it sure did me. I think this is, again, the best writing I have ever read on the topic. And it blends the two as I understand the issues. So I really appreciate what David Cogburn has written here. Well, God bless you.